Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next Catalyst 300 presentation today on Catalyst Day. Thank you all for being with us. We are going to have a presentation today from our group who is speaking on, as you can see from the slide in front of you, Ending Domestic Violence in Texas by Reforming Domestic Abusers. I'm Professor Matsky. I'll be your co-host today, also joined by Professor Joe Hatcher, who is the other co-host. Just to let you know a little bit about how this will work, our group will give their presentation, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end of that. If a question comes to you during the presentation, please feel free to put it in the Zoom chat, and we'll address it after the presentation is completed. Also, you'll be able to unmute yourself at the end and also ask your question verbally if you would rather do that. But in the meantime, we will turn it over to our group, and please go ahead, everybody.
Peyton Altman.
I'm Jillian Heidenreich.
I am Shrevely Paulson Islandfeld.
I'm Caleb Klinsing.
And I'm Kevin Top.
Our focus is on ending domestic violence in Texas by reforming domestic abusers and creating the Saguaro Cactus Rehabilitation Center. Domestic violence is an epidemic that affects approximately per minute, specifically by an intimate partner in the United States. Webster's dictionary defines domestic violence as violent or abusive behavior directed by one family or household member against another. Research has shown that 1 in 7 women are abused by an intimate partner and 1 in 25 men are abused by an intimate partner in their lifetimes. In Texas, the numbers are worse, with over 5 million Texans experiencing domestic violence in their lifetime. This breaks down to 34.5% of Texas women and 35.1% of Texas men experiencing some form of domestic violence in their lifetimes. 1 in 3 Texans experience domestic violence at some point in their lifetimes. Adults who are victims of domestic abuse have reported increased rates of depression and suicidal behavior. In addition to the emotional and physical costs to the victims, there are physical challenges as well. Women who have experienced domestic abuse spend almost $104,000 on related bills during their lifetime, such as the legal and medical fees associated with the abuse and the lost productivity from paid work, which occurs from having to miss work, coming in late, or leaving early. Men in the same situation spend a little over $23,000. Victims of domestic abuse are also at greater risk of job loss, 21 to 60% of the time, due to reasons stemming from the domestic abuse. 30 million children in the United States annually are reported to have been exposed to some form of domestic abuse before reaching the age of 17. Even if children are not directly victims of the abuse and have only been witnesses, there are still higher rates of depression, aggression, and they are found to have poor academic records when compared to children that come from non-abusive homes. There have also been some apparent gender differences in domestic abuse when it comes to children. Young boys who are exposed to domestic abuse tend to be more violent, aggressive, and demonstrate poor behavior when compared to boys from non-abusive homes, while girls tend to be more withdrawn and depressed. These effects have shown to be long-term, as those who are victims of domestic abuse or have been exposed have shown to be more likely to abuse substances in the future, such as drugs or alcohol. Additionally, 17.3% of children who have experienced abuse themselves have also attempted to commit suicide, compared to the 2.3% of children who do not experience any domestic abuse. Foster care is where some children currently go when being taken away from an abusive home. In 2019, there are almost 430,000 children reported to be in foster care in the United States, which rose by over 2,000 from the reported number in 2015. Children in foster care also are at greater risk for mental illnesses and health issues, such as obesity, learning disabilities, hearing impairments, and speech impediments. Additionally, children in foster care are 6 times as likely to demonstrate behavioral problems. Domestic violence has 3 main subcategories: coercive and controlling violence, situational violence, and responsive violence. Coercive and controlling violence is violence that is meant to frighten or harm the partner to control them, and it accounts for 29% of cases, with a male perpetrator as a source of violence 95% of the time. Situational violence is the escalation of emotional arguments, and it accounts for 23% of cases, with males as the source of violence 56% of the time. However, responsive domestic violence, such as pushing, accounts for 44% of cases, women being the source of violence 96% of the time. To further explain, men are more likely to commit serious harm towards their partner through coercive or situational violence than women. A study conducted found that within a year of release, 25% of men continue abusing. After extensive research, we found that unaddressed trauma, usually stemming from childhood, was one of the main reasons why abusers have felt the need to harm. Among inmates in prison, alcohol and drug dependencies are common and often are not properly treated. Individuals in prison have also reported to not receive effective care as they do not feel safe, psychologically or physically. The image included on this slide is from a museum in Texas, replicated a typical Texan prison cell. Additionally, being confined for long periods of time has also led to higher rates of aggression, which is particularly unhealthy when domestic violence is concerned.
Obviously, this is a problem for which there are already solutions or methods of aid in place. One solution that has already been put into action is the expansion of what qualifies as child maltreatment by child public welfare agencies like the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, since previously domestic violence was not included under the definition of child maltreatment. By expanding the definition, it allows for intervention for the safety of the child under more circumstances, which will help remove more children from dangerous situations without limiting when the authorities can get involved. Another solution in place to get kids out of abusive situations is mandatory reporting, which requires professionals licensed by the state of Texas to report potential abuse cases to social services or the police so that they can investigate. These professionals can include teachers, healthcare providers, attorneys, and even members of the clergy. This kind of reporting was considered very effective at helping to remove kids from dangerous situations, which is why Texas, along with 18 other states and Puerto Rico, expanded the definition of a mandatory reporter. Now called universal mandatory reporting, this means that if anyone thinks there is a child in danger, they are obligated to report it to the authorities so that the child can be helped and removed from the situation. This sounds like a logical and helpful step, but in reality, even though the non-professionals were more likely to make a report in a state with universal mandatory reporting, their reports were also more likely to be false and unconfirmed. This meant that they don't necessarily help find more cases of domestic violence when they implemented universal mandatory reporting to widen the parameters of who is required to report the situations. However, it does still successfully remove some kids from dangerous situations and make the state aware of the harm being done. If there is a report of child abuse that is substantiated, Child Protective Services is the next step of the solution, and they will step in and take the child into CPS custody to keep them safe. Generally, this will be effective and will prevent further harm from being done to the child, but unfortunately, sometimes there are families who were approved to be foster parents who continue the abuse the child was already experiencing. These instances of abuse in foster homes only account for about 1% of all child maltreatment reports because foster homes have to be held up to a certain standard in order to be allowed to take in foster children. Once again, it is an effective solution for removing children from dangerous situations, but that is all it does. These solutions do little to change the behaviors of the abuser to prevent them from continuing to abuse people, whether they are the same as before or they are new. It is rare that the abuser is imprisoned, and usually they continue on with their lives and hurt more people who continue to need to be helped by the resources in place for victims. The Duluth model approach flips the script and instead works with the abusers in a rehabilitation type program to end the abuse at the source. The Duluth model approach was founded in Duluth, Minnesota, and has had around 1,500 programs based on its model because of its goal to re-educate the abuser, which differs greatly from other existing solutions. No program is perfect, but they have had success, and the 25-week rehabilitation program operates similarly to an Alcoholics Anonymous program with steps to go through along the way and support groups to help throughout the process. Their goal is to restore the safety of women who have been battered by holding the abuser accountable and changing the pattern of actions. Included in the Duluth model approach is the Duluth Family Visitation Center, which attempts to create a safe family environment in the lives of women and children affected by abuse. The Duluth Family Visitation Center supervises visits between the child and the parent responsible for the abuse in an attempt to build a positive and safe relationship between them moving forward so that once the rehabilitation has been completed, they can be reintegrated as a family if they would like to be.
Our group's proposed solution is the creation of the Saguaro Cactus Rehabilitation Group. This group is a tax-exempt nonprofit parent organization, which in design is used to construct 3 different facilities that we will go into detail on. The first model, it works directly within the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the TDCI. More specifically, this works with a system as there are 2% of domestic violence assailants within prisons that are the worst offenders and committed some of the most heinous acts. This program will operate as an in-prison treatment and education program. Inmates will go through a 25-week-long program laid out by the DMA. Inmates can become involved in the program in a few different ways, either by being required by a judge to participate, recommendation by the prison warden, or by their own choice due to their recognition that they have an issue. This facility will be staffed by counselors who are trained directly with this form of rehabilitation, and because of it, it is coordinated with TDCI and will be little to no cost to inmates due to the grants available. Once they have completed this program, they will have the choice of admission into the residential facility or the halfway house facility that will be mentioned shortly. The second facility is the Saguaro Cactus Rehabilitation Center. This will operate as a 30-bed residential facility for inmates, and once they are released from prison, offenders will be ordered to participate as part of their parole or as an option to stay out of the prison system. The facility will operate on a 24-hour team of professional mentors and psychologists to ensure that patients can get the help that they need at any moment. Similar to the first facility, the residential rehabilitation facility will have a 25-week-long program that the patients are required to work through. At the beginning of the programs, individuals will receive a comprehensive evaluation and treatment planning conducted by the program intake counselors. Additionally, the patients will attend individual therapy, group therapy sessions, including community meeting groups, recreational therapy, and yoga, among other activities, to build their skill development and finally empowerment training. This intensive program ensures that the patients are prepared for life outside the rehabilitation facility. It helps to make sure that these individuals receive the psychological help that they need to not repeat the actions, but change them. Following the 25-week-long program, the individuals we transferred to a halfway house facility. This halfway house provides a sense of community and freedom for these individuals. To help create this sense of community, rooms will be doubled up, meaning each resident will have a roommate. This helps foster community by creating shared experiences between the individuals. Additionally, it will help to also keep accountability and costs down. The halfway house is defined as a transitional living facility for those in recovery. Halfway houses allow individuals within these facilities to get help they need as they transition back into society. And they will also go through a 25-week-long program. However, they will have more flexibility around the ways that they want to complete that.
The budget for the 3 styles of our care facilities is relatively large. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice's 2020 budget allocates $35 million to halfway houses, just under $10 million for alternative treatment programs such as rehabilitation centers, and $31 million for prison treatment services. And because we are working closely with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, we will be able to tap some of that funding for the creation and implementation of our program. Additionally, we will be able to receive funding through grants from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, including the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, and the Center for Mental Health Services. To help determine the cost of our budget, we looked into a proposed rehabilitation center by Susan O'Connell that she conducted in 2014. She proposed 4 almost $5 million budgeted 16 patients public rehabilitation centers for the state of Montana. And each center had approximately 16,000 square feet. And it kind of helped us come up with the initial cost for our facility. Obviously, because we are a larger facility with 30 individuals, it would require a 38,000 square foot rehabilitation center at a construction cost of about $10 million. For the halfway house, it would be approximately 10,000 square foot facility at a cost of just over $3 million. Personnel cost for the 95 employees, including administrative staffing, would be over $7 million. Curriculum and training, including the implementation of the Duluth model approach, would be $78,000. Licensing and accreditation would be between $25,000 and $55,000, seeing as we are a medical facility. And other expenses would be just over $500,000 for a total initial startup cost and budget between $22,448,256 and $22,478,256. Additional funding we would receive would be through grants from the U.S. government, the Texas State Legislature, the United Way Foundation, the Family Violence Prevention Service Foundation, and because we are a medical facility, we would be able to receive Medicaid reimbursement for individuals participating in the program between the ages of 21 and 65.
With the solution that we've come up with, there will be plenty of impacts. Some are positive impacts and some are negative impacts. The negative impacts that our solution will affect is water and global warming. Our solution can negatively affect clean water and sanitation because we're looking to create live-in rehabilitation centers, which will require the consistent use of running water through showers, washing dishes, and many more. With that being said, it also goes hand in hand with affordable and clean energy. Our solution can impact global warming by only obtaining or using products that are reusable or recyclable. It's not always possible, and the rehabilitation center will ultimately negatively impact global warming, which is another reason why our solution will negatively impact life below water and climate action. Our solution does not only have negative impacts, but also positive impacts. The positive impact of our solution will affect the industry itself. It will affect the industry by expanding the industry of rehabilitation and creating jobs. Our solution will help sustain cities and communities because it will be located in urban areas. So our rehabilitation center can create growth for the communities that they are a part of. Our sustainability goals are to reintegrate abusers back into the society step by step as they stay at our rehabilitation center. As mentioned earlier by Peyton, life-threatening domestic violence is often done by a male abuser. However, that is not the case. We will help create more gender equality and stigma surrounded by the subject, since women more often commit non-life-threatening situational attacks, such as slapping or pushing. We are not only helping abusers, but also the person and people that got abused get back on their feet as well. Being abused can change a person a lot, so we will do our best to help them get back to where they were before ever getting abused. With that being said, there will also be steps in place with the employers in our facilities to help an ex-abuser find a job so that they can get back in the right direction and back up on their feet. Another goal is to help the abuser and the person being abused have a better health and make sure their well-being. We feel that the legal system separates families more than necessary, so we're hoping after extensive rehabilitation to reintegrate families as long as their health and their well-being can be kept at a positive level. In our rehabilitation facility, drug treatment services will be provided to help those with a reliance on substances, which will increase the health of the abuser. And the goal, in some cases, the violence will stop once the substance abuse stops. So we will be able to safely integrate families or couples back together. However, our major goal from this is to have the facilities and the community come together as one. They connect with one another because if one is not doing good, the other one will pick up their slack. With the rehabilitation center helping out the community, vice versa, they can work side by side to become one. In conclusion, we have 3 different models that we have based our solution on. Each one will help in a different way. The first is the prison rehabilitation center, where it's beneficial for those who struggle at a higher level of abuse. The second is our half-style house, which allows flexibility towards the abuser when they want to attend those 25 different weeks, which brings us to our third model, which is the Saguaro Cactus Rehabilitation Center. It is a program used as a substitute for behavioral correction in the prison system. This helps abusers focus on therapy and reintegrate them back into their families in a safe way. We'll need around $23 million for our rehabilitation center. Once we get our funding, we'll be able to start building our rehabilitation center. Thank you guys for listening. Do you guys have any questions?
Great, thank you to our group.